Their whole economic system is broken down. They thought they were going to outweight me. We'll outweight him. He's got the midterms. I don't care about the midterms. Well, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I'm doing that for the world. I'm not doing it just for us.
President Trump speaking during his 12th cabinet meeting of his second term, accusing Iran of trying to stall on making a peace agreement by running down the clock before November's midterm elections in the hope of getting better terms. U.S. forces did carry out another round of self-defense strikes in Iran overnight. They intercepted 4 Iranian drones near the Strait of Hormuz, and then they struck a nearby drone control station. Iran reportedly was about to launch a 5th drone from a station in Bandar Abbas before the military stopped them. Joining me on set is Michigan Congressman Bill Huizenga. He's a member of House Foreign Affairs. Congressman, it's great to have you here.
Good to be with you again, Cheryl. Yeah.
What do you make of this new overnight news with the Iranians? It's a fragile ceasefire, to put it mildly here.
Well, I mean, here's part of the problem in Iran. You have for lack of a better term, a civilian government, and then you have the IRGC and the mullahs, right? And those two aren't necessarily on the same page. This past week and the last couple of weeks, we've met with almost every single one of the ambassadors out of all those Gulf states. They all are very interested in making sure that there is change in Iran. Obviously, you saw UAE and Saudi Arabia take action against Iran, but it's a problem because the president, Marco Rubio, who I have great confidence in actually cutting a deal, unlike some other previous administrations. Who are they cutting the deal with? What I do know is, though, this has to get resolved. I mean, I'm hearing this from constituents all the time about gas prices and the effects that we're feeling back here in the United States. So that's certainly something that we need to keep in mind.
Actually, Maria spoke with Kevin Hassett. He was on the program, and she asked him about energy prices. I want you to listen to what he told her. This is very interesting. Let's play this.
How does the president balance here getting oil prices down while also keeping up the activity in the Strait of Hormuz and in Iran?
What I can say is that as soon as the straits are open, then energy prices are going to plummet like nothing you've ever seen before. There's so much oil sitting in the Gulf, there's so much excess capacity in Saudi Arabia and UAE that prices should drop very, very quickly. And since core inflation has just barely budged because of this temporary circumstance, then I expect that the big positive supply shock is going to overpower oil much sooner than people know. So think about it. We've got a capital spending boom. We've got a labor supply boom because of the no tax on tips. We've got an AI boom. Stock market is celebrating, and the stock market is celebrating because profitability and productivity are so high. So those are things that put downward pressure on prices. And so I think very, very much that the bond market understands that. You're starting to see it, and that's why we're so bullish on the economy still.
And Congressman, in your district in Michigan, I'm sure that you're hearing a lot of talk about energy prices and pump prices.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And that's one of the reasons why, frankly, I've called for a gas tax holiday. The federal side of this is 18.5 cents, but in Michigan, we're one of the highest. It's 52.5 cents. I mean, that'd be over 70 cents a gallon if I believe we would do the right thing and the state of Michigan would do the right thing and have a temporary gas tax holiday while this is getting sorted out. And I think whether it's Bessent or Kevin Hassett right there talking about this, I think they're right. You look at how the U.S. has become far more self-sufficient when it comes to energy, but the world still needs a free and open passage through the Straits of Hormuz that's going to affect that world energy.
But President Trump says that, look, we're open for business. We're happy to export and sell oil to China. That would be quite the accomplishment after his summit in China. That why not make the United States the world's leading exporter of oil? What do you say to that?
And in his first term, we became a net exporter after being a net importer. So I think we're on the right path that way. But we have to have refining capacity. We have to have the exploration going on. That means making sure that we've got a smoother path towards permitting and all those other things. But it is critical that we have the Straits of Hormuz opened up so that whether it's Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, UAE, others, that energy can get out of the Straits and onto the world market.
Do you think that the Abraham Accords, having our Gulf partners, do you think that that's a plausible idea?
That's a very good question, and that would be monumental. And already, look, you've seen the UAE and others in the region that have joined those the Abraham Accords, and that's a very, very positive thing. That would add stabilization. That's one of the reasons why Iran is fighting back as much as they have been and using proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas and others, because they don't want that peace in the Middle East. We do. I think the administration does, and obviously I think the American people and hopefully the world, the stage wants to see that too.
Many analysts believe that October 7th happened because Iran wanted to stop progress with the Abraham Accords. I want to ask you about what's happening on the Hill. So Republicans are working to get the party line immigration funding bill back on track after it got derailed last week, obviously. The president's $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund is a major point of contention on the Hill. There's a lot of arguments about it. It aims to establish a formal process for Americans who claim they were targeted through politically motivated actions under previous administrations. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer was here yesterday, and actually the chair that you're sitting in, talking about Reconciliation 2.0. He says you're still going to get it done. Listen to what he told her.
Yeah.
The problem right now is communication and information. Now we're talking about American citizens who have been targeted by their own government having a cause of action. And I think members who are opposing it right now or want more information.
Do you expect the reconciliation bill to fund immigration to be on the president's desk by June?
I do.
So you're going to get this, the Senate will get this done in the next couple of days, you think?
We've gotten to know each other a little bit, Maria. Where I come from as the whip, if you say you're not going to do it, you're not going to do it. It's like the big, beautiful bill last year.
Yes,
we said we were going to get it done by July. We got it done by July. The president wants this by June 1st. God forbid that the senators delay this beyond that date, because the House will get it done.
June 1st is next week.
Yeah, and we're not in till next week. But Tom Emmer is a very good whip, and there's a reason why he is our whip. He's got great insight into that. And look, at the end of the day, we need to see what the Senate is going to pass. The House has done our job. We've done our job for a long time, frankly, and it's been a holdup in the Senate with all of this. But honestly, can I just make a comment about the entire system and the whole process of what we've been going through? This is extremely frustrating, not to just those of us who have to go in and vote on this, but it's to the American people. They're looking at this saying, why is our government broken? And frankly, it's one of the reasons why I introduced a bill called No Budget, No Pay. If Congress can't do its most fundamental, basic job of funding the government and working that out, then we shouldn't be getting paid. And I have not taken a paycheck when we've had government shutdowns, done that voluntarily. The Senate finally, through Senator Kennedy, has actually put some language in that would escrow senators' paychecks as well. I think that's a good step, because that actually shows the intent of what we need to do, which is deliver for the American people and have government actually function.
Well, we talk about another reconciliation bill in the fall. The problem is the calendar. I've said this repeatedly, because it's a midterm year. You're up for re-election in November. Yep. How are you feeling about the midterms right now? I mean, is the GOP at risk of losing the House?
Well, look, every single election is a very public job review. And as soon as you walk into this, assuming any kind of outcome, that's when you get into a lot of trouble. So we've got very good candidates. They've done a very good job recruiting, and I think we will have a good, solid November. But we've got a few of those things that we got to sort out, like energy costs, like a number of those other things that that affordability question is real. And I feel good about where we are in the House of Representatives and even the Senate. But everyone's got to mind their garden. They got to tend to their garden and make sure they're doing their work.
You have been doing your work. I just want to hit this really quick. You did recently introduce the Deterring American AI Model Theft Act. This is your legislation. You want to stop China and Russia from stealing American AI models. Talk about this.
Yeah, it's called distillation, and I know you guys talk about it on the program a lot. And what we're trying to do is figure out ways that we are going to curb the access into these various models, so that the Chinese and the Russians and others, they grab all these weight models and then they basically build their own on the backs of all of the work of U.S. companies. And that's going to be a key part as we're going ahead, trying to figure out what the future with AI is going to look like. And I don't want to give China an advantage over us, and that's one of the reasons why we have to look at what we're doing with licensing and chip availability and those kinds of things. I thought it was interesting, the story about Snowflake and Amazon.
Yeah.
That's big, that's huge. Recently, I was out in Silicon Valley meeting with a number of those folks, and the issue is real. So we've got to make sure that we are paying attention to it.
We're going to be watching that, Bill, certainly.
Yeah,
Congressman Huizenga, it's great to have you here on set with us in New York.
Good to be with you.
All right,
Thanks.
we'll be watching
Yeah.
everything from you. We were going to take a quick break. We'll be right back, everybody.